And good afternoon, Ms. Keegan. How are you doing? It's Good Friday, April 15th, 2022. I hope that you are celebrating this day to the best of your ability. Hi, my name is Gregory Roberts. I'm the host of Torn in Two. It is mostly cloudy and 41 degrees outside. We have a very, very big show, a great guy, but I got to get to my co-host, Melvin C. Burns. How you doing, sir?
I'm wonderful this afternoon. How are you, brother?
I'm excited. I'm really excited. um, my throat is a little weak,
Okay,
but I'm very good. Would you introduce our guest? Because we're going to go right into the show.
good, good. Folks, our guest this afternoon is Professor Richard D. Wolff. Professor Wolff is a professor of economics emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and he's a visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs at the New School University in New York City. He is also the founder of Democracy at Work and host of their nationally syndicated show, Economic Update. His latest book is The Sickness in the System: When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from the pandemics or itself. You can find this book along with his other books, which are Understanding Socialism and Understanding Marxism. You can find it at www.democracyatworks.info.
Let me say something before we get him on the screen. People, we only have him for 30 minutes. So I'm going to ask that you guys hold your questions. The professor has graciously said that he would come back um, to talk about other subjects and to address this subject. We only have him for 30 minutes, 28 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Professor Richard D. Wolff. How you doing, sir?
I'm very happy, and I appreciate your calling the folks to clap their hands. That's very kind of you. Very kind.
Listen, and people are already clapping their hands and they're coming up with the questions already. Professor, I need you to help us out. We need to understand, because there's so many issues out there with critical race theory and what it's not. Would you please break it down for us? I know you have a limited time.
Sure, it will be my pleasure. First of all, as I think many people do know, it is not something new. It is not something that just sprung on us last month or last year or anything like that. Basically, critical race theory asks what really ought to be a kind of obvious question. The United States, from the beginning of its history, has had a fundamental problem about the relationship between white people and people of color. Whether you call that racist or racism or racial inequality, I mean, there's 100 ways to describe it. But everyone knows it's been there from the beginning of this country's history.
Mhm.
And what critical theory begins with is saying, well, something must be going on in this society to make it necessary for us, centuries after the beginning of this country, to still realize that we have racial inequality, racial discrimination all around us. So the obvious, and I really mean the obvious question is, what is going on in this society to keep that alive? And let's remember, we live in a country which says it celebrates the notion that all men and women are created equal, that everybody is beloved by God if you're religious. And all of these notions of equality and democracy, we say all of that. We want to recognize it. At least I hope we do. So then we really do have a question, given those values, given the history of this country, what in the world reproduces decade after decade what we see? You know, and let me be an economist because I'm a professor of economics for a minute. the African American community doesn't have the jobs, doesn't have the income, doesn't own the wealth. I mean, the index of a second-class citizenship for African Americans in this country is never ending. And it's in many ways, it's worse even now than it was 10 or 20 years ago. For example, the great crash of 2008 and 9 was more devastating for home ownership by African Americans than it was by any other group in the society. The little bit of wealth that African American families were able to accumulate in terms of, sharing ownership of their home with the mortgage bank they borrowed from, all of that, or not all of it, but almost all of it was lost because that economic downturn hurt the African American community more than it hurt the other communities in our society. So for me, critical race theory is the demand of thinking people, white and black, to understand what is it about this society that keeps this kind of thing going. And it's important to understand, but even more important, if you're ever going to do anything about this, obviously the efforts in the past to overcome it weren't enough. So we need to understand what has to be done now in order to address this question. And one last point. I know that in parts of the United States, and you all know as well as I do what I'm talking about, the argument is made you shouldn't teach this sort of thing because it makes some folks uncomfortable. I mean, I'm a professor. If I didn't teach what made somebody uncomfortable, I'd have nothing to say during the day. I mean, I explain like World War II. That makes a lot of people uncomfortable. You know, we fought against Germans. Do I have to stop talking about World War II because people who come from German background are made to feel uncomfortable?
Come on now.
Sorry, but being uncomfortable is part of what learning is all about. We don't exclude from the curriculum things that make you uncomfortable, because often those are the things most important for you to finally learn about and that overcome your discomfort so you can actually fix the problem.
So you addressed it, but what is making so many people so scared, making this a political dog whistle?
Well, I think my answer, and again, I'm an economist, so I look at the world a little bit that way. So we're in an economic system, American capitalism, that is in deep trouble. Let me tell you a little story to kind of get it across. I'm on the left end of political points of view. I know that. But I went to all the fanciest universities in the United States. I went to Harvard and Yale, and that's what I did. 10 years of my life, 20 semesters in the Ivy League. So I have friends, I became friends with some of these folks. And there are people who are in the middle and people who are on the right wing. We're friends. We went to school together. We get together occasionally and have a beer or a cup of coffee or whatever. And here's the thing that I tell people that might amaze you and your audience. We don't agree how the American economy got itself in the current condition, and we don't agree on how to get out of it. But we do agree, which surprised us, we do agree with the following sentence. And you can see from my white hair, I'm an older fellow, right? We agree that this right now, as we're speaking, is the worst condition of the American economy in our lifetimes.
Wow.
I mean, the level of problems we have, I could go on all day, but it is a very troubled economy. For example, the debts people carry, the debts corporations carry, the debts of the government, they're all at record levels. We haven't been able to live within our means as a society for 30 years. We used to have, a little debt. Then we had a little bit kind of mortgage debt for our house. But let's go through it now. We have mortgage debt for where we live. We have car payment debt to be able to have an automobile. We have credit card debt for everything, including the little bottled water we pick up at the corner store. And now we have a new generation of college students that are drowning in debt up to their eyeballs.
Right.
This is a country, that's a sign that you're not managing things real well.
Come on.
I live in New York City. We just found out the latest statistic. Just think about this. In one city, New York, 685,000 families are behind on their rent.
Wow.
And they are facing eviction. If you begin to throw out tens of thousands of people, this city will become unlivable. And not just for the poor people chucked out of their house, but for everybody.
Mhm.
We are at the edge of a kind of cliff, and we don't seem to understand that one bad move and we're going to go over. And the reason I mention this is most Americans still can't get their heads around facing the economic problems we have. So instead, they look for scapegoats.
Come on now.
Someone else, somebody, the bad guy somewhere, that they can point the finger. Look at Trump, right? He told the American people that those very, very poor folks from Central America who are trying to come north to get a job, to save their families, they were the threat that was it. I mean, come on, we're a country of 325 million people. You know what the maximum estimate is of undocumented immigrants in this country? 10 million. Well, I'm an economist. No way can the 10 million of the poorest people in this country be blamed for the economic problems of the 330 million that make up our society. That's crazy. But we have a long history of looking for scapegoats. And you know better than I do that African Americans, Black people have been a high priority choice for scapegoat. And I think what you're seeing is the dog whistles, particularly in the South, but in other parts of the country too, are just rallying calls. Let's get mad at Black people again. Let's start telling crazy stories that somehow benefit programs that are aimed at African Americans, that are usually, by the way, more white people anyway than Blacks, use them, welfare. Let's start telling that story again to try to make people believe that what's hurting them in their pocketbook has got something to do with Black people. You know, I have it in my classroom. I have to deal with students who come from families which tell each other that kind of story. And those young people are usually smart enough to understand. You know, I tell them these days, who sets prices? Because Americans are upset now that we have an inflation, right? Prices are going up. Gasoline at the gas station is going up. And so I look at them, I say, is that a problem? And everybody nods their head. Yes, it's a problem. Good. Now, let me explain to you who sets prices. The answer is employers, the people who run businesses. If you've ever worked in a business, and most of us have, you probably noticed that if you're an employee, you don't participate in setting the price of whatever it is you help to produce. That's the right, that's the prerogative of the owner of the business, of the corporation. So if you want to know who's raising prices, you and I both know who it is. It's the employer. It's the 1% of our people who are employers, not the 99%, because they're the ones who have to pay the rising price.
Come on.
The employer is doing that. And therefore, if you're upset about the inflation, don't talk to me about immigrants or African American. Stop. You're just not willing to look at where the problem is. And unfortunately, you live in a society where the mass media, most of the time, are filling your heads full of real junk rather than talking honestly to you about what the problems are.
Pastor Melvin Burns.
Yeah, so many. Professor Wolff, I want to go back despite what you might think, we're finding that people still don't have a clue what CRT is.
Right.
Don't.
You say most people know. No, most people don't know. Give us an example where we've seen I shouldn't say it's a thing, the kind of thought that goes into critical race theory, where we've seen that played out in public policy or government making, or even in the private sector, where we can say this is an example of what critical race theory, where it brings us to.
Okay, good. Let me pick. I mean, there's lots of choices, but let me pick one that might help, because it talks about something, current events right now.
Okay.
Russia, on the 24th of February, Russia crossed the border with its troops into a country called Ukraine. You all know, everybody knows about it. It's in the newspapers every day, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Here is a war, and I'm now going to give you the statistics from the United Nations, which monitors this. As of right now, from the 24th of February to the moment we're speaking now, the UN estimates a little under 2,000 people, civilians, in Ukraine have been killed. 2,000. Okay. Russia invaded. The war there had been going on about 50 days. 2,000 civilians died. And that's terrible. And I feel for them. And that shouldn't have happened and all of that. All right. But the United States is behaving in a remarkable way, which I think will help you understand one of the roots of racism. We just ended a 20-year war in Afghanistan, not 50 days, 20 years.
20 years.
The United States invaded and the United States occupied, and the United States killed people and bombed people and droned people. And we're not talking 2,000, we're talking tens of thousands of people in Afghanistan died. Okay. Now, everybody in the world who pays even a little attention kind of knows. And yet we have a president, Joe Biden, and he's not the only one, but he's the honcho, so I'm going to mention him. Joe Biden says that what Russia is doing in the Ukraine that has killed 2,000 civilians is genocide. He uses it's a war crime. It's he hypes it. And the whole world, and I mean it, I read European newspapers every day. The whole world looks at the United States, scratches its head, and says, what in the world are they talking about? They're in no position to call that if you want to talk genocide, what you did in Afghanistan, what you did in Iraq, that's going to get the name first, long before you come to the Ukraine. But the Ukraine has got an interesting quality. The people are white, and the people in Iraq and Afghanistan aren't. Now, nobody says it, but everybody sees it.
Yes.
Now, we live in a culture where the killing of some people is somehow way worse than the killing of other people. Number one. Number two, we do notice where the police shoot a kind of too quick, too often, and shooting people in the back. I mean, this country is overwhelmed every few weeks, it seems these days, by yet another questionable, I'm being as polite as I know how, questionable killing by the police of somebody who, guess what, turns out to be dark-skinned. I mean, you're giving a message. Part of the reason police do that is because when they're scared and when they don't know quite what to do, they have in their heads ideas that makes it somehow easier to pull the trigger when the person is dark-skinned than when the person isn't. And, I don't even blame the particular cop, because whatever he or she did that was wrong, they come out of, here comes critical race theory, they come out of a culture that has slowly, in lots of little ways, given them the idea that some people are more dangerous than others. Some people are not quite as valuable or as precious as other people. They don't mean it. If you ask them a straight question, they wouldn't say that. But in the back of their minds, that stuff sits there, and critical theory wants to admit it and wants to ask the question, why is that reproduced over time? And for me, I'm grateful that the people who believe critical race theory are raising those questions, because I deeply believe, based on my life, I was born in Ohio. I've lived here all my life. I'm an American. I know that I encounter discriminatory, anti-Black comments all the time. Don't tell me it's not part of the culture. I mean, if you don't know that, then you must be living in a really very tight bubble somewhere on the moon. Because I know, having lived all over this country and worked, that the race issue remains very important in this culture. It's a fundamental flaw of our system, and a real patriot would want to talk about it, to understand it, in order to do better now than we've been able to do in the past to get over it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said a mouthful. Professor, how do we get out of this quandrum that we're in right now that, I mean, with media and all this kind of stuff, the scapegoating and what you just said, how do we turn the corner on this?
Well, again, I'm going to come at it from economics, because that's what I know and how I would deal with it. So in my understanding of the world, you're not going to get people to accept one another, to really begin to think of us all as human beings, and that it really isn't all that important what the color of our skin is, or whether we're left-handed or right-handed, or whether we're 5'11" or 5'10". We all have differences, and they really don't matter very much. How do we get? Well, one of the things you got to do to develop that awareness is you got to break down big differences between people. So, for example, African Americans have to be able to have the same general pattern of jobs that any white people have. In other words, there got to be some Black executives and some Black supervisors and some Black folks on the line and some Black folks they got to be everywhere where everybody else is.
Professor, can you please say that again? You're preaching good. Pass the plate.
Okay. That they have to be, African Americans have to occupy the same places in the economy that everybody else does. Otherwise, the economic life of our society is a constant lesson in inequality. Look, I grew up in a suburb of the city of New York. I don't mind telling you, it's called New Rochelle. You may have visited, about a half an hour out in Westchester County. Okay. I grew up and I knew exactly where in New Rochelle Black people lived, because they all lived in certain neighborhoods. And I had friends, and I would go to those neighborhoods, and the houses weren't as well kept up, and the yards weren't as well taken care of. And I got an education, which, if it hadn't been for my father, I would have drawn the conclusion that many of my white friends did, that there was something wrong or inappropriate or lacking. I wouldn't have understood that the society creates these neighborhoods and real estate dealers perpetuate them and banks won't lend money and a blah, blah. I didn't know any of that. Nobody taught us that. We just saw a group of people living in a different way. That should not be in our society. You are educating young people like me with these things that we see. You make it possible for racist people to tell you a story about what you're seeing.
Come on.
For me, I want a Black person to be the supervisor of a white one just as often as the other way around. If we're going to divide the labor, we divide it equally. Look, women have been fighting for the last 50 years in this country to finally get treated a little bit closer to the way men are treated. It's the same kind of struggle. The women understand it. That's why we get these ideas of glass ceiling or sexism. It's, we could call it critical gender theory if you wanted. It would be the same thing. It would be saying, look, even to this day, women doing the same work as men get paid less. Okay, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Women and men have different skills, sure, no problem. But that's the very different question from systematically closing off opportunity to women relative to men. And exactly the same or parallel has been done with African Americans, generation after generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not denying that compared to what the days of the Klan and of Jim Crow and all the rest of it, yeah, there have been some improvements. That's not an argument. I'm okay with that, as long as we understand that the improvements haven't changed a whole lot of other things that are just as urgent to be fixed as was, having a separate drinking fountain or being unable to sit in the front of the bus and all those other things. We don't do that anymore, and that's good. I don't want to take it away. But by the way, the things in the past that got better, the people who fought for those made other people uncomfortable, but they didn't stop for that reason. And people today should not be even told such a thing. I heard a senator and a governor from the South, from Florida. You all know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Telling people, I'm opposed to all of this critical race theory because people shouldn't be made to feel uncomfortable. This is the guy who won't let gay people even function in his state. He doesn't care about them being uncomfortable. What is this? This is so transparently phony that you lose it takes your breath away that he can get away with talking like this. Critical race theory is old. It goes back many generations. It has been a long-term effort by white and black people to come to terms with the fundamental injustice and inequality that this country inherited from its time as a colony. Look, blame the British. They started the slave trade, so blame them. And then at least let's get down to saying we got to get over this because it tears this country apart. It tears us apart. Literally, every day I open the newspaper wondering what policeman in what city did something awful, and now people are in the street, and now, and look, I'm grateful that when it happened to George Floyd, and it created a tremendous, wonderful. That makes me proud that people were upset enough to say, wow. All those people know this isn't new. What happened to George Floyd happened to who knows how many George Floyds. We don't even know their name.
Say it.
But now, at least now, we are having people in large numbers saying enough. And for me, critical race theory is that cry, enough. We know the problem is here. We live with it every day. Let's finally be honest, talk about it, and try to change this society so we don't suffer in this way. And since I think the American economy is in real trouble, and I think I have to say to you, in case your audience can't face up to it, not only are we in trouble inside with the inequality we have, with the look, the United States is 4.5% of the population of this planet. And we have just suffered 17% of the world's deaths from COVID. We are a rich country. We have a highly developed medical system. You know what that means? If you're just 4.5% of the people in the world, but you account for 16, 17% of deaths, it means you failed. You didn't handle this crisis.
Wow.
And I want to give you one more statistics. China, the People's Republic of China, that's a country with 4 times the population of the United States. We have 330 million. They have 1.3 billion people. Okay? So they have 4 times more people. We are just about to cross 1 million dead from COVID. Should happen any day now. Now I'm going to tell you the number of dead, according to the United Nations, from COVID in China. Hold on to your hat. 10,000 people.
Stop it.
Wow.
That's it. 10,000 versus a million. They have 4 times the number of people we have. I mean, we're living in a new world. It's not just that we have problems, but we got a real competitor now, the way we have not had for a century. And that competitor, not a white person neither. So you better get ready for a very different world that's coming out. And you're not going to stop it. You're not going to stop it in Ukraine. You're not going to stop it with make-believe, telling our people silly stories to comfort them. You better face some very uncomfortable truths, like the one I just gave you about COVID, or like the economic growth of China, or like, critical race theory, because you don't have all that much time left. And the competitive reality of the world that the United States now faces is nothing like the last century. The last century was a ride up the roller coaster. We are now on the way down, and it's never fun to be on the way down. Not the least of the pressures on race in this country are that as the thing deteriorates, everybody who can tries to push the burden of adjusting down onto whoever they can kick below them in the pecking order. That's how this system works. And you are provoking poor people, white and black, in ways that are showing up in the divisions and the bitterness and the breakdown of this society. Look, I live in New York City. My neighbors and I, we don't use the subway. I used to use the subway several times a day. That's how you get around New York City. You know why? Because everybody's scared to death to go on the subway. Even before the shooting the other day, people are terrified because there's so many poor people, so many homeless people, so many people who need mental health care that is no longer provided in the institutions that should have been there, just like we should have had the clinics for dealing with COVID. This country's not working very well, and pretending your way out of it, like saying, I won't deal with critical race theory because it makes me uncomfortable. I mean, it makes you look like an idiot to talk like that. You should welcome these basic questions because they're the only hope this country has to come out of this.
Wow. Professor Wolff, I know I promised you 2:30, and it's 2:33. Will you at least come back on the show? Because
absolutely,
I know that you're busy.
Absolutely, because, I have to say yes to that. Because I just gave you a half an hour telling you why we have to face these questions. If you ask me to come back and talk some more about it, I say no. It makes everything I just said look a little flaky. So I don't want that. I don't want that. But beside that, I believe in this. I'm grateful that there are programs like yours that face up to this stuff and talk about it. So absolutely, get in touch with us, and we'll schedule another one. It'd be my pleasure.
Professor Wolff, how can people watch your syndicated show and your website? Go to your website.
Very, very easy. The quickest, easiest way to get everything we do is Democracy at Work. That's all one word, democracyatwork.info. Go there, Google it, go there, and you'll see the weekly radio and TV show we do, videos we produce, written stuff we do, interviews I do, you name it. It's all there, and it doesn't cost a nickel.
And you, one last thing, you said this has been around forever. Critical race theory. Actually, you talked about it before then. It was called critical theory.
Yes,
and we can even talk about that too.
Right.
Right. Professor Wolff, thank you so much. We're going to have you on again as soon as we can.
All right.
Thank you,
sir. It'll be my pleasure.
Take care, sir.
Good day to both of you.
Good day.
You as well.
All right. Wow.
Man, let me say 2 things first, Greg. First of all, we call this 22, and we say we pull back the covers. For any future guests, we want you to talk. And people think, well, they're not asking questions. People hear us blather all the time. I love a guest when they come on, they can just talk. We give them that forum and an opportunity. So if you ever be for a guest on the show, do exactly that. So I appreciate that. Second thing, man, it's like you just got the syllabus passed, and now you can't wait to get to the rest of the class. That was just the syllabus got you on fire.
Man, there is so much follow-up that I want to do on that. But we have to respect Professor Wolff.
Sure.
This guy is nationally known, internationally respected, and we were able to get a major kudos to our producing director, Lady J, for finding him. And he's going to come back, and because you guys had some, he has a bunch of books that we just put up. The Sickness of the System, I really want to get that book. But understanding socialism and understanding Marxism is just some of the few books that he has. He is an economist, but he speaks on race relations and everything you can find. You can go to YouTube and look up a lot of the things that he believes in, and he teaches. Also, I want you to share this today. I want you to go put it on your Facebook sites and share what that man had to say, because he broke that down to the nth degree. And let's go. We're not even going to do a commercial. The one thing that I want to talk about, one of the things that I want to talk about is that when the economy or when things are going bad or stuff like that, people look for a scapegoat.
Man, hey,
I mean, he broke that. That was brilliant.
But let me throw something at you, because just you're saying it, this thought occurred to me. You go to restaurant everywhere now, and they're short staff. What's the first thing people say? Nobody want to work, right?
Right.
Now, when you hear that comment, in all honesty, what comes to your mind?
What comes to your mind?
They don't want to work.
They don't want to work.
They get them stimulus checks, which people haven't gotten in a year. They're getting those stimulus, they're getting food stamps. They don't want to work. Nobody thinks about all the senior citizens that dropped out of the workforce during COVID. Nobody talks about the workforce that's stuck there at the border, can't get in here. Nobody talks about the two-parent households, two-income households where one person decided we're okay with just one income after the COVID experience.
Or we can't afford child care.
Yes, exactly. Somebody's ill, can't get back in the workforce, or people. So when you hear that, and I hear it all the time, I keep reminding people they don't want to work. Who is the they that don't want to work?
Right. Or they have a degree in something, but yet they were working a job at McDonald's, let's say per se.
Yeah.
Then COVID comes, and then they decide, I'm not going back until I find a job in that particular degree.
Yeah. So I love that idea of there's a scapegoat, there's somebody else's fault. And again, we're paying high prices. And I heard one politician say, they're blaming you for high prices. Well, we don't set the prices, and all oil companies decided they weren't going to pump any more oil. They'd rather make big profits.
Okay, you are watching and listening to Torn Into It's 2:39. We'll take your questions, take your opinions about what you thought about Dr. Wolff now. So you can start right now. I mean, he said a mouthful.
He did.
I wanted him for the whole hour
Yes.
next week. But I do understand in watching some of his interviews, this is a guy that you see on CNN, MSNBC, Fox. You see him on all the national channels, and we had him in here in Muskegon.
Yes.
And he's going to come back with to explain what he said, and we're going to make sure that we have that. Another thing that I want to talk about is that it's amazing that the economics that he talked about it, because the economics really affects African Americans and poor whites. But all of a sudden, somebody looks at something, that dog whistle, to divide us, to say, oh, that's a black problem. Oh, those people over there, like you said, they don't want to work, which is not true. Uh, they want to live on food stamps and live on the government, which, if you look at the number, a percentage of people that use the welfare system, it is higher on the Caucasian side. It's not that we're not trying to make you feel, yes, we are. We're just trying to tell you the truth. It is not no walking around the issue. The fact is like Dr. Wolff said, is that there are some uncomfortable issues that we have to address. And the thing is that what you're going to see in the elections in 2022 and what you have seen, I even saw this in Herschel Walker's race, where he couldn't hardly say it. I don't think he could he actually spell it, but he was talking about critical race theory. And people are saying, well, we don't want our children taught this. Okay, here we go. Marianne Zeus, how you doing? She said, facts are facts. Even if they hurt people's feelings or make people uncomfortable. Very, very, very true. And that's the thing is that us addressing history is history. I'm going to say that again in case it went over your head. History is history. And it should be the people that are in charge write the history books. Hello? But that's what's happening. So I have to wait to see a movie about women that helped the guys land on the moon. Why didn't I know about that before? Because I wasn't taught it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that what are we going to do about that? Are we going to sit up here and still accept those racist jokes or those insensitive things that we see that people are sending to us, or are we going to address it? Go ahead, your table.
No, you're right there. That idea of uncomfortable. I wouldn't have learned algebra if uncomfortable was the issue. I wouldn't have learned calculus because they made me very uncomfortable. But that's how we learn. That's the process. And again, we recognize these ideas as don't make us uncomfortable. We don't want to know the rest of the history. We know those are covers for other things. And it don't make us stronger as a country. They make us weaker. They absolutely make us weaker as a country. They make us weaker people. We don't want to face truths.
Okay. Hey, Jack. Hey, slow down. Make y'all questions shorter. Dissertations. We got to read these things. A Florida American said, you should go get a better job than COVID hit. And behold, people took the advice. Now, he says they don't want to work. He says, I've been in the restaurant industry for almost my entire career. He says, drive isn't dependent on race. One race over another doesn't have more drive. Now, a fluent American is perplexed. Shouldn't it be if you're paid attention? Wow. You just said a mouthful, Jack. Shouldn't it be? Pastor Melvin.
Yeah, I think Jack points out a couple of things. One is, we can't look at this economy the same way since COVID. We don't. It's not. We talk about churches, and the grocery stores, everything being different since COVID. Well, this economy's structured different since COVID, and so again, I tell people I'm not an economist, but I look in the restaurants, I look around, and I see who's working. I see people changing jobs. I have young people, man, they change. I was reading an article the other day. It said young people and millennials, when they want a pay increase, they change jobs. They don't say, well, I'm gonna work hard to get a promotion here and a promotion there. But somebody wants to, I can't tell you that's wrong. I'm saying that's the way they see the world now. So you can't make them see it differently. And so there's somebody that benefited from the economy being a certain way. There's somebody that benefits from not teaching something about history. There's somebody that benefits from truth not being told.
Very, very. The thing is one thing that he did talk about, but he insinuated is that the economy is going to hit some people, but it's not going to hit the 1%ers. So if you look at the stock market, the 1%ers are doing great. The people are getting the tax bracket, and the tax bracket where it's not taxed or don't pay their fair share, they're doing fine. They're making a lot of money right now. Joe Biden tried to tax people they made $400,000 to help better the country, and people fought it. Let's go back to comments. Marianne Zulz, she said, I'm that person, pastor. I'm changing jobs now because I've topped out where I am. And she says, and it isn't enough to live.
That's what people do. I mean, they don't, well, maybe in a couple of years, they'll give me a 3% increase. That's not what people, and their jobs there. And so that's what people do. But I go back to, I forgot, I lost my thought, Greg. You had just said something I was going to comment on, and I lost my thought on it.
That's right. Now, I just want to go through some of the things that people said, because we had a lot of people talking, saying stuff. Here's one thing that you see, that blacks are lazy. Myth. How many times have you had to hear that one?
Well, people don't say it outright anymore. Again, we say stuff like, they're giving people too many benefits and they don't, nobody wants to work. So we don't use those. You don't hear those exact words, but we know the context behind it.
Oh, I can tell you some of the things that they would say. Those people in Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, nothing good happens. People, that's a dog whistle.
Yes, yeah.
That's a dog whistle. What they're saying is those people that are black are not doing and not trusted. Not trusted. All right. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. We're going to go to a commercial, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Good Friday. You're watching Torn in Two on 103.7 The Beat and M106.
The wait is over. The all-new Umoja Radio Network, home to over 40 black-owned radio stations and podcasts, is here for you. Connect to the world's fastest-growing collection of unapologetically black and proud media, from podcasts to independent black-owned radio stations, and access to the important news and music you need. Umoja Radio is from our culture, by our culture, for our culture. The all-new Umoja Radio is available right now on Google Play and the Apple Store. Join the movement. Be empowered.
The second annual I Am Her Feminine Hygiene Drive, supporting young ladies from Ghana, Africa, in need of everyday essentials and feminine hygiene products, was a great success. Thanks to the generosity of our community and organizations like Period.org, Muskegon Heights Public School Academy, Confident Cosmetics, Muskegon Heights Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Inc., and everyone who made a contribution. Hundreds of young ladies and village members received essential items. The community made a lasting impact with more than 10,000 sanitation items donated. If you would like to help, donations can be made year-round by dropping off items in the donation shed at the Mays and Wright Media Center, located at 1877 Peck Street, or making a contribution to paypal.me/1037thebeats. For more information, call 231-727-5007. Thank you for supporting I Am Her Foundation.
Welcome back to Torn in Two. It is 2:49 on this April 15th. I think I don't know if they extended the tax day or not. But if Monday. It was,
yours obviously are done.
Yes, mine are done.
It's Monday because mine are not.
Okay, so get those taxes done.
Yeah.
We want to take this opportunity. It's Good Friday, and we want to, first of all, I want to go back to Dr. Wolff. If there is any people or any subject that you would like to address, take a pen. I want you to get a pen right now. Get something to write with. 231-727-5007. 231-727-5007. If we can get that posted. If you want us to address something, we will. I want to talk a little bit about next week's show. Next week, we talk about this myth of the angry Black woman. And we will have a good friend of mine. Thank you, Marianne, for putting that number for me. The angry Black woman. We're going to talk about that next week. I feel that as the critical race theory, that it was important that we address that issue as well. But I want to talk about, take these last couple minutes to talk about Good Friday. And I'm going to let Pastor Melvin lead the way on this. Out of all the bad that is happening in the world, there is good news. Pastor.
For as those of you who follow the program know, I'm a Christian pastor, and today is Good Friday. This week is what we call Passion Week, but it's also I'd point out it's also a holy time for those of the Muslim faith. This is Ramadan. We're right in the middle of Ramadan, and today it begins Passover for those of the Jewish faith. But as a Christian pastor, this is the beginning of Good Friday, and if you know the church history and the Christian history, on this day, that our Lord was crucified, or the day we commemorated. Not to have a debate about what actual day, but we commemorated on this Good Friday. And then coming Sunday will be Easter Sunday, we call Resurrection Sunday. And a lot of time we close this program by saying do good and do good to people. But it's a time for us to reflect about this faith. This is the weekend, as we commemorate, that makes us of the Christian faith, it makes us Christians and separate. And so it's also a time to, like for me, for the past week, just kind of reflecting on what my faith means and how I live it out. Our ministry Sunday about redemption. And to me, one of the greatest things about this faith is we get to change. We get to not be what we were before. Our guest talked about mental health issues, people with all kinds of issues, but we get to change and we get to be something different. Mm-hmm. We get to get things in our life different and get some perspective. And so I want to just encourage, we have a lot of guests, people that hear this program later, but I want to encourage people, whatever your faith may be or your practice, this is a good time just to think about where your life is. We all need things we need to change and fix in our life. We all do. There's relationships need to be mended. There's people that we need to forgive. We need to be forgiven. And sometimes we just need a nudge and we need a push. And one of the things I think about my faith as I practice it is, it gives me a little more courage to stick my neck out there and apologize. It gives me a little more courage to ask somebody to forgive me. It gives me a little more courage to sometimes face people that I wouldn't want to face, just as a person. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that, as this weekend passes, that maybe you feel a little emboldened, about your faith and the things it's supposed to allow you to do to be a better father, a better mother, a better son, a better daughter, a better citizen in your community. That your faith is supposed to encourage you and inspire you in all those aspects of your life.
Here's the challenge. The challenge is that I've talked to a lot of people that said such and such person did X to me, and I will never ever forgive them. Let me talk to that person right now. Some people, their mothers and fathers, people that said, I will never speak to my mother, my father, whatever again. I only wished that my mother and grandmother and father were alive. But they are gone to a better place. And so I'm happy for that. So I'm thankful for what God given me. if you are on the sound of my voice and there is somebody that you need to make up with, doesn't it make sense, especially as we're getting older, doesn't it make sense to make amends, at least try to make amends of those situations? Or are you going to carry that to the grave? And I find a lot of people are just eaten up inside, whether it's something that happened in the past or something like right now in the future where people are dealing with that shooting in Grand Rapids. When we get all the facts, we're going to talk about that. Or whether it's Russia, Ukraine, a lot of people are just watching too much TV, and or if you're mentally struggling with that, or the bombing and shooting that happened in New York and other places, that people, there's so much stuff out there. But you know what? There is good news. There is good news. There is redemption. There's grace. Our faith said it was about 3:00, about this hour, about this time, when he said it is done.
Yes, it's done.
That you take the opportunity. Don't sit up or to sit on your hands and not forgive somebody and let that eat you up for the rest of your life. Pastor?
Brother, you said a mouthful there. We're overwhelmed. The things we have happen in our own community, and we see the things on the news, and they say New York and the Ukraine. We're overwhelmed. Give yourself a break. Let yourself off the hook. Take a break. May not be the warmest weekend here in Muskegon, but give yourself a break from that. Nobody's child ever complained about their parents spending too much time with them. Nobody's sitting down with your family, turning off your cell phone and your Facebook, your notifications for a little while, but give yourself a break from some of that. To just do some things that give you, when you were talking about the work that came to mind, is give yourself some peace.
Yes.
Give yourself some peace.
I want to, the critical race theory thing that Professor Wolff talked about.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many people that don't have a clue. And all the comments and stuff that I see on Facebook is so ridiculous. Here's the fact. We're that great experiment, America.
Yeah.
We're that great melting pot. But there's a great divide where people are trying to divide us by race, by gender, by whatever you think, by religion, whatever. But think about it, people. If we're divided, we can't come together and make positive solutions happen. You watch in Washington, what's going on. You watch in Lansing, what's going on. You look at that division. And that division is keeping for progress from happening. And excuse me, if we want to take care of this scapegoating, we have to realize, here's the fact, that racism does exist in this country. It does exist in this country. My religion and my faith says that he was no respecter of persons. He was no respecter of a person, so neither should you be. Pastor, any last words?
No. Hey, brother, I enjoy doing this with you. I enjoy the guests we had today. Thank you to, our comment section is blowing up, but, people don't have to listen to us. So I appreciate the folks that come on to listen to the show, that comment, that get involved. Thank you all so much. We enjoy doing this. We hope it's a benefit to the community. So we appreciate those folks that come on, that comment, give us good and bad feedback. Thank you all for that.
I want to thank you because, again, what you said, there are so many comments with Dr. Wolff was on, but we really wanted to hear what he has to say. We will have him on again. You enjoy this Good Friday. Have a good Resurrection Sunday. It's just an honor for us to be able to do what we do. Go sow a seed in somebody's life. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next week.